Yes, so this question is to Dr. Gordon Reid and Mr. Violi. Declining homeownership data shows we are becoming a society where younger generations without inherited wealth will soon be locked out of the housing market. So soon retirees who own homes will need these same younger people to fund their health care, pension, and aged care services through ever-increasing taxes. This hardly seems fair. What specific ideas do you have to avoid this breakdown of the generational contract?
I think I'll start with Danielle Wood.
Fantastic question. Thank you for it. And we obviously had the intergenerational report come out last week, which was pointing to some of the very issues that you are raising. This has been a slow-burning issue. Home ownership rates, as you say, amongst young people have been dropping like a stone for a long time. Ageing population will push tax burdens higher for working Australians in decades to come. So we need to tackle each of those issues head on. So on home ownership, supply is absolutely critical. The reason we have seen this huge divergence between incomes and house prices over the past 2 decades is we haven't built enough supply. So I'm very supportive of the decision of the National Cabinet last week to try and incentivise states to build more houses in areas where people want to live, close to jobs and amenities. That will be critical. On the question of tax, we have made this generational transfer much harder by the fact that we have basically said that people will opt out of the income tax system when they hit 65. So only about 12% of people over 70 pay any income tax. And because we have these increasing costs associated with aged care, with health, that is meaning that we are pushing this burden onto younger Australians. So we do need to look at the tax lever. I think we do need to think about taxation in retirement, because I think that's the only way you're going to address the heart of this problem, which is a big transfer effectively from one generation to another.
Gordon.
Yeah, thank you so much for your question, David. We know that housing is a huge issue right across the country, in particular the regions in my area of the Central Coast here in New South Wales. And that's why we've put together a suite of policies with regards to housing to really try and tackle that issue. Many here in the audience tonight and many watching on tonight will have heard of the Housing Australia Future Fund, which is a future fund in order to construct tens of thousands of social and affordable homes for those frontline workers, but also to family and children fleeing domestic violence, veterans who are homeless or at risk of homelessness, First Nations people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. But currently that's being stalled by our friends in the opposition and the Greens as well. But that's just one aspect of housing. There's the Social Housing Accelerator Fund that was recently announced, that $2 billion housing fund that will go to the states, roughly $500 million to New South Wales, for new social housing builds. There's recently we had our...
Can I draw you to the question about the generational contract and whether it's broken down? I understand you're doing lots of things on housing, but so clearly we have a really, really significant issue. If you look at the intergenerational report, looking forward, young people are going to have to prop up old people unless there's a fundamental change to the tax mix. Do you think it needs to happen?
Look, what we recognise is that we need more houses to put people in. Help to Buy, all of those schemes, the Regional First Home Buyer Grant as well. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, has been pretty clear on his stance on taxation and taxation changes at the moment. We are making modest changes to the taxation system, whether that be through the Petroleum Rent Resources Tax, whether that be through making multinationals pay their fair share of tax in this country. I think that's really important. And also to changes to superannuation balances over the $3 million. These aren't small changes, but they are changes that we are starting to make in the tax system, and the Treasurer has been pretty clear of that. But I think and to the intergenerational report itself, what it shows is we have some significant challenges that are coming up in the future, and we do need to be planning for those challenges. Because if we only look 10 minutes ahead or look 10 seconds ahead, which has happened under previous governments, then we're going to be walking backwards into the future and we're going to trip over. So it's making sure we're investing in housing, we're investing in clean, renewable energy, making sure we're diversifying our energy mix. It's investing in housing, and also too, which is important, which hasn't been done for quite some time, is investing in people. Skills and training to get Australian people into Australian jobs in Australian industry, in particular the care economy, which was a focus of the intergenerational report. You know, getting people into those fee-free TAFE positions and Commonwealth-supported uni positions for areas of need and national priority. So investing in people, investing in industry and productivity, investing in housing and investing in Australia is the way that we can address this challenge.
Jana, do you worry about your kids
100%.
ever buying houses?
Of course I do.
Written that off?
I mean, if they have to look after my finances in the future, it's going to be a problem. At least there's 6 of them, so they can all contribute to the various... No, but I asked the question of you say that we need to increase the amount of housing within our systems, right? But I did an amazing talk out at Camden this week to their community, and they have no access to railways out there. So they're pushing all these young families out there. There's no access to jobs. They're travelling an hour to get to work every day. There's no transport into the city for them to do so. So we keep pushing these people rurally, but they have to work in the cities. I just don't know how come we can't move our whole systems and our hospitals, everything further rural to set up sort of smaller cities in a more regional setting? Because we're also crying out for, you know that, as a doctor yourself, crying out for that regional and remote access to resources.
So we have that issue on the Central Coast here. So
incentivise them, though. And isn't there not a way that we can push families to feel we can expand?
But they have to be economies of scale, right? You have to be able to actually...
The whole thing's got to go. As a place, move as one whole system.
Yeah, so that's investing in things like transport, making sure, and that's just to put in perspective the National Reconstruction Fund. So making sure that we're building things in Australia again, including things like trains and buses and ferries and the like. So investing in that transport, but also to being able to live, work and play
in the
where you live.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a big thing that I'm after on the Central Coast, and making sure we're investing in local
Jessie in if I can. You're next to me, Jessie, and I'm missing you.
I don't know a lot about tax, but yes, continue.
I suspect you know a little bit about housing. And this is actually, you know, do we have water coolers? Do people still have water coolers? It is the biggest conversation people have at the moment.
Yeah.
And God, young people are angry. They are so
really
grumpy.
Angry. And then, so you can't afford a house, so then you need to rent. And the rental prices are so beyond astronomical because you're paying for someone's mortgage, and someone who perhaps has multiple properties, and you know you'll never get in, and you also don't have any security. So you can be kicked out at any moment. I've got mates who are having their first, second children and are in places where they don't know, how do you do a catchment area? How do you work out where you're going to send them to school if you don't know where you're going to live? And these rental increases are just suffocating, and they're not indexed on how much more we're earning. So there is an enormous amount of resentment, I think. I think the thing that makes the most sense to me is reading a bit about vacancy tax and sort of looking at houses that the fact we have potentially 1 million houses that are empty, and then we have a whole lot of people who can't find housing, just seems the maths isn't mathing for me. So,
Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very important question. It is topical. I mean, I've got sort of, I guess, a first principles belief on housing that every Australian that wants to own a home should own a home, and it's got lots of implications. Jessie's right, the security. It's one of our most basic needs. If you don't feel secure, you're not going to feel part of a community. And we see volunteer numbers are down, and because people aren't setting up roots in their communities. So there is significant challenges in terms of housing that we need to address. It's complicated because there is local, state and federal governments involved. And it links to the intergenerational question that you spoke about. And something I called for in my first speech was a systematic and comprehensive review of both the tax system and federation, and not ruling anything in and out. For too often, we've done tax reviews and we've said, well, we're going to look at this, but we're not going to look at something else.
That's at odds with what your political party's saying, though.
And we need to have those conversations.
Do you think your leadership should also embrace everything being on the table? Because at the moment, Liberal frontbenchers, when I speak to them, say, no, we can't do that, no increases, no... But there has to be a wholesale look, doesn't there?
So there needs to be a white paper that looks at federation, and I know it's a bit of a boring topic, but it's
Spice
crucial.
it up for us.
Well, because what we need to... And this is part of the challenge that we raise, that we need to have a comprehensive discussion with experts looking at these things with no political lens, and then suddenly it becomes rule in, rule out. What does your leadership think? There are short-term political questions for the day, but we can't be talking about the GST in isolation or capital gains tax or any taxes. We need to look at holistically and understand that there's a trade-off. So if we increase the GST, that's a regressive tax and there is implications, but can you reduce payroll tax? Can you reduce stamp duty, which is a tax on housing? The first thing, we talk a lot about the amazing financial deregulation of the 1980s. What's not often talked about is that there was a review by the Fraser government that looked at the financial system and asked all those questions and came up with some answers. And then the Fraser government and the Hawke government implemented many of those findings. And I'm saying we need to have those conversations because young people can't get into housing. Older people have worked really hard, and it's important we also, when we talk about older people, understand that many have savings, but there are many that don't. And I do also think, and I have people that come and speak to me in my community that get a little bit frustrated about this intergenerational war, particularly older females that have left a relationship, don't have financial security. So we've got to be really careful in the conversation. And I think we just need to be prepared to have a look at everything. I called for it in my first speech. I'll continue to call for it. I'll continue to talk to colleagues about it.
And tell your colleagues not to make it this political war all the time.
Well, I think we all, between the media, between politicians, we need to look at everything and understand the pros and cons.
You're calling for a moratorium on the tax wars, aren't you?
I think we need to. The intergenerational report, it is never accurate to the number, but it showed, you look at the deficits that are forecast for the next 40 years, that's not sustainable. So we need to find solutions, but we need to make sure that everyone in the country is sharing the load, not being punished. These are big challenges we have. And if we're not prepared to have a national conversation now, when are we going to have that conversation?
Well, we're probably going to make our kids and grandkids do it at this stage.